Okay, let me just get set up here for a second. Give me a moment. So, oops, here we go. Roadmaps that think. So, going back to Ginter's talk we had in the beginning, like the one before, it's a really good foundation to build on top of that. And I think roadmaps done well can be a really, really powerful tool guiding your organization, guiding your product with what you're planning to do. But before we dive deeper into that, look at these questions here, and I'll just give you a minute and go through them. Maybe take out a small piece of paper and write on it. Which of these questions are true and false? Just go through them here for a moment. Everybody had a chance to go through all of those 5 questions? Okay. So the answer is really simple. All of them are false. What you have been seeing here right now is essentially a release plan. And Ginty before, she called it like an output-based roadmap. So that's what I consider to be a release plan. So if your roadmap looks something like this, by these quarters we deliver these types of features, that's not a roadmap, that is a release plan. Because it's, and this was mentioned before as well, it's about difference between output and outcome. So output is what we create. Think about output is the stuff in your shelves on your hard drives. It's the material you accumulate in your corporation. Once you give it into the hands of the users and they see benefit in using it, working with it, that's outcome. Now, if you don't deliver outcome, only output, you can see how long you will be successful as an organization. And that's where, for me, like a good roadmap comes into the picture. So at another conference, I learned that you don't introduce yourself in the beginning, kind of you do this somewhere like in between, so that's my slide about myself, but Paul did a great job already, so here I am. Now, what is the underlying problem? So roadmaps are seen as a fixed linear plan. We do this, then we do this, then we do this, then we do this, and everything will be following that way. And essentially, these are the features we have lined up in a sequence we're going to implement. And by doing this, we confuse outputs with value. So essentially, we often talk, if you look, any one of you here being a product owner or worked as a product owner, knows a product owner, there's in the Scrum Guide, there's this one sentence, the purpose of a product owner is to maximize the value of the work of the Scrum team. So value means kind of customer outcome. And the other big problem I'm seeing is that strategy is detached from your market, your customers, and technology. And strategy is something I see most organizations really struggling, or they just do it simply wrong. They believe strategy is a plan. We build a building over there, we hire 20 people, we train something over there. That is a plan. A strategy is a choice. It's a choice about a playing field where you think this is the playing field where the future will be playing on, and you commit to that. You cannot control it. And this is related to the market, you believe, where its playing field is, the customers who you're playing for on that playing field, and the technology. So, and this is really, if you're interested in that, look into the works of Roger Martin. He has a good video out there and a book about that topic. And a roadmap should also be linked to your strategy, or your roadmap should essentially support your strategy. The other thing is what I often observe is that discovery and emergence is willingly ignored. While we work on things, stuff happens around us. And it could be good, it could be bad, it could be learnings from our customers. And if we ignore that because we have our release plan already lined up, we lose opportunity, basically, in the regard what we want to achieve. And this is also why I have this word willingly in there. Sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, that's interesting, but no, we have to stick to the plan. And this has a lot to do with product discovery and validation. And I think this is also the thing we have to be aware of. Because our roadmaps should be open also for adaptation. Roadmaps are not linear. I have never seen a real roadmap where there was no intersection or junction. There's always points where you have to make a call. Do I go left or do I go right or do I go straight? So you have to really go ahead and think about those decision points to inspect and adapt. Where am I? Where do we want to go? How does this align with the strategy I'm trying to follow? And am I still on the right track? Or do you need to make some adjustments here and there? So essentially validate your current outcome where you're currently, and then go back to what I just mentioned, like with the strategy. Does it still align with the market beliefs I'm having? What's happening, or where it will be moving? Also in regards to the customers and maybe the technology we're going in and working with right now. So this is when I started to think about maybe we should reframing the idea about how we work and how we create roadmaps. And the way I start to think about it is that the product strategy is our direction of travel. We know somewhere over here, that's where we believe the success of what we do will be. And our roadmap is our currently best guess about how the path going there will be. So roadmaps should really serve the product, not the other way around. And what I often see also is that organizations are being set up to make management easier, but that's the wrong thinking. Because we don't work for ourselves, we work for customers for which we want to create outcome, value. So we have to think about them and then find out how do we have to structure ourselves internally to get the best out for them. Now, what does this mean about the past? And that's another realization I had at some point, because right now we are here because something was made in the past, something happened in the past. So you cannot ignore the past when you think about the future. So the past somehow informs the decisions we are making today to get to our future. So, and now going through that, reading up a little bit, I found this really good sentence. So history is not about what happened in the past, it is about the decisions which were made in the past. And today we make a bunch of decisions which will basically guide our future, which will at some point be in the past. And then we think about those decisions here again. So we have to really connect these points and see what does it mean for us. And I found this sentence from Anna as well. In the thick present, formed by the patterns of the past, sensing the patterns of the present, detecting the patterns of the emerging future. Kind of like this describes it really, really well, I think. So, and this has then the way I like to think about, like the narrative about our roadmap. So what is our strategic intent, and why is it our strategic intent? What happened in the past? Why do we believe this is the right thing to do right now? And how does this all somewhat fit together? So the connection between the past, the future, and the present. And there's a really good exercise I did once on a workshop with Dave Snowden. It's called Future Backwards. So right now you would be on this beige hexagon, and then you anticipate a perfect future, utopia. And you also anticipate the worst possible future, dystopia. And then you work backwards. Which events lead to that? And which event before that leads to that? And so on and so on. And you do it both for dystopia and your utopia. And at some point, usually those hexagons, they merge. And if you look then at this hexagon, just say, now this, if we ever run into this situation, and you can think about it as a really strong signal, we have to be very careful, because the next decision we take could take us either way, dystopia or utopia. And then from that point, you could work again backwards to your current present. So where are we right now? Which step would lead us to then which one into the future, so that you get an idea about what could happen. And then you can use this also as information. And I think also there's the power of the narrative, also like storytelling. And there's this 3x3, which was created by Chris Lucas. And then essentially, now once you let's say you onboard somebody, and here or this person just asks, so what's going on? Why are we doing what we are doing? And I think if you give them this story you can create with this template here, they should have a really good understanding about what's going on. So essentially think about it like bingo. So essentially, first one you can cross off, which is story, because you write it in longhand, kind of a story, not just bullet points. And then you try to bring in those elements, analogy. Maybe just say, we don't want to be like this company because this happened in the past and we have some insights, but we believe there's an opportunity going this route, and this could be a possible solution right now. Now, if you really try to manage to cross out all of those 9 elements, you should be in a good shape, essentially, to have a good story, which you can tell people, saying, hey, you know what, this is where we are right now, and this is where we believe we want to go for these and these reasons. So, as I said, you cannot ignore the past, and what we have here is what we often have in product owner material is the product management onion. Usually at the top, most organizations luckily have that. They have a vision for their company, where they want to go. Based on that, they derive their strategy, and then based on that, you would then have your products, each one of those having a vision, and then essentially try to find out how can we deliver value in that context, how could we do that solution and value discovery, and then you work on that. So your roadmap is kind of going downwards, but there's a counterflow, like from your past and what you do today, kind of going into the better future. And I looked at that image and I just thought, that's not looking too good. It's kind of hard and confusing. And looking a little bit further, I discovered this one here, which I think is much, much better. I couldn't find the source though. If anybody knows about that, please let me know. So essentially, those great triangles pointing into the future, and that's the past. And every time something happens in the past, you kind of reshape that. So there would be anticipated things happening in the past and something which was unanticipated. And that then often trigger things. And then basically putting all of that together, that brings you into today. This is where you are right now. And then you think into the future. This is where we are. But the further you look into the future, the more it widens up, the more uncertain it becomes over time. Now, the length of the whole green triangle, that's what I consider to be the current roadmap we believe is the best possible thing to do for our product, our current path. And maybe sometime into the future, I don't know, the next 2 months, that's kind of, probably these features will be happening. Think about this as your release plan. Now, if any one of you is kind of working in the context of Scrum, you can think about it then essentially this way. So you have your vision. This is where we believe we need to go. And that vision, the product vision, might shift a little bit over time. And the problem with the vision often is that it's too far ahead. There's a strong disconnect. So essentially, there's a product goal in between, which normally I like to think like 4 to 6 months into the future. And for that, essentially, then you would go ahead and set up your product backlog in order to get there. And then you would kind of, using your sprints, trying to work towards the product goal, which you believe is a valuable outcome for you. So the whole thing together, kind of like where you are right now, with an intermediate step with your product goal towards the vision, you can think about this as your roadmap, essentially. And the current product goal, that's the way I like to think about it, is your current compass. This is kind of your direction north. Now, based on that, I created something which I like to call the product goal canvas, where things are being put together. I'm not going to talk here about vision, that's a different topic, but let's say you have the vision of your product, and you can just put it at the top, right? Then you think about now achieving that vision. What is the next major step we should achieve? The next best outcome we believe is the right thing to pursue. That's your product goal. Now in this setup here, it's just a single sentence. And it's a good practice for me if you would start off by, let's say 6 months ahead, so probably by November, we will have. And then you describe a certain outcome you want to achieve, but not more. Because the next section, the description, that is the narrative why you believe this outcome through the product goal is what you really need to achieve. So maybe sort of we have observed these and these things happening, and we believe if we do this for these types of people, they should be able to that, which will provide this benefit. So essentially the idea is again that if you put somebody in front of that, they see the vision, they see the one line, and they see the description behind that. That should give them enough context to understand, yep, that makes sense. Let's do that. But how would we know that we have been successful in what we are going to do? And that's where the next section, the valuable outcome and measures comes into the picture. Because often we set out to do something, let's do something about this and that, but we are not really clear about what success looks like. That's a really powerful question. So if you do this and you have been successful, what would it look like? And then people start to think about that. So write it down again in words. What would success look like? These people could achieve this in half the time or something along those lines. And then underneath you would put the measures you're going to measure. Now think about the sensors you would maybe bring into your product you're going to work on, or maybe some other things so that you can collect feedback as you work on that. And there's leading and lagging. So this inspiration comes from the 4 disciplines of execution, 4DX, like maybe what can we do today? And this also, in my opinion, ties somewhat together with the thinking of OKRs. So lagging is like, what do we want to have once we are done? And what can we do leading, helping us to get there? So often leading could also be activities. And there are 2 columns, like one is for the market end user and the other one is the internal capabilities. Because you might have the world's best ideas for your users, but if you don't have the internal capabilities to make it happen, to realize it, it doesn't help. Now, sometimes you have to build up internal knowledge, you have to build up internal structures and infrastructure and some other elements. So these could be leading capabilities. Maybe leading on the market end user could be, which also was mentioned before, maybe calling potential customers, asking them where it hurts, what they're looking for, what problems they are observing. This also helps you to really understand the problem in a better way, the problem definition. And once you have that, like these activities, you can just say, well, once we have launched the product or released this product goal, we should see these measures happening, so the needle moving in a specific direction. This goes from 10 to 20% or something along those lines. Now, everything we do, again, is not in isolation, because in the end of the day, we serve stakeholders. And one of the more important stakeholders are our users. So who are the people who are actually going to work with that product? And too often, we forget about them. The hectic we are in. So it's kind of, who are we serving with what we do? And the way I think about it, a product makes someone's life easier. Something which was harder to do today should be easier for them in the future. So we solve problems. So how do we make the users' lives better? Then we have influencers. Now, influencers could be important persons in your own organization or external. If we don't get this influence, and this is, now I mean a real influencer, not the like, let's say, on social media. If we get this person on our side, that would be really great. If they're against our product, we have a major problem because they have millions of followers. So think about, who are these people? How can you engage with them? What can you learn from them? Now, provider is everything they provide something for you. If they don't deliver, you would have a problem. It could be external companies building stuff for you, or it could be internal people. If they're not available, you would have a problem. But think about those. Who are the people who are kind of in charge of the provider or themselves, and then interact with them? And then governance. So we have often internal governance, that we have to deliver specific numbers at specific times of the year to certain departments so that they can do their governance. But also external governance, rules and regulations, which we have to follow. Now, we also have to be aware all the time when we do something that we stay compliant with those governance rules. Now, that's what I think about product management. It's really like, you should really understand your stakeholders and make sure you have a good engagement, good relationship with them. And it varies depending on whether you're talking to a user or to somebody from external governance. Yeah, sometimes you can push, sometimes you shouldn't. and think about how you can really do that. So if you tie this back together, I think if you have a good roadmaps with measures and metrics built into it. So this is our path we are traveling on right now. This is our roadmap. But these are the sensors, the measures we have put into place, giving us feedback as we go. And that's what happens in a car when you drive. You see how fast you're going, you see the temperature of your engine, how much gasoline you have left, or your battery, how much is still charged. Now this is information you can work with and make adjustments as you go. And this then enables EBM, evidence-based management. We just, we're not just going here by belief, we go by numbers. We're informed by information and by data points, and we can leverage that to make adjustments as we go. And then also this has then something to do with how you can really maybe also adjust your budgeting process and make it more fluid. Because I strongly believe that the degree of how agile an organization can become really depends also on how flexible they are there with shifting their budgets around if there's new insights, new discoveries. If you get one budget plan for a whole calendar year, and that's what you have, and that's what you have to work with, and something happens halfway through and you still stick to that, you probably don't leverage all the possibilities which are out there. And, if you look at, if maybe you have several roadmaps within your organization, it drives then also the alignment to see how things are going, and then you can compare and make better educated decisions. So roadmaps help with stakeholder engagement, and with that you can really communicate your clear strategic intent, the why. Why are we doing this? Why do we believe this is a good vision? Why do we believe this is a good product goal we want to achieve? And by doing this, you going more to an outcome-focused language and just saying, we do these things, and then we do this, and then we do something over there. It's like, these are the goals we want to achieve. These are the outcomes we want to deliver to our end users. So essentially, it's the what and the how. But then as you are going onto this roadmap, you have to put in those decision points. Sometimes it's just important. Let's go back to analogy with the car, just to take a break and stop and think where you are and what does it mean. Do we still have, I don't know, am I still alert enough to keep on driving, or do I should make a longer break or do something else? And that's again with the decision points. Take a breath, step back, assess the situation. And I think this is where those intervals in Scrum, let's say the sprints you have are an important point where you stop back, take a breath, engage with the people, learn from what's going on, what they like, what they don't like, absorb that. But also in a bigger context, once you essentially reach a product goal, okay, now we are here, what does this mean? What could be the next meaningful goal for us to achieve, and what do we need to do in order to get there? And those decision points can also help you to assess your risks you might still have, because there are some risks you haven't handled yet. They're still around you. They're still dangling on top of you as the Damocles sword. And what can we do about that, or what options do we see? And also for stakeholders, because every stakeholder is curious about, what does it mean for me? What's in it for me? And what's the impact in their domain? And if you can really clearly communicate that through your roadmap, that's what's happening. This is what we are planning to do. They have a better understanding, and if it is helpful for them, they will be on your side. So there might be positive influencers. If not, you have to think about how you can work with them to mitigate the impact from them. So again, for me, I see a roadmap as an implementation narrative, essentially. It's the story about why are we doing what we are doing in a way where we hopefully also can bring in some numbers so that people know what's really going on, and we can provide transparency. So it's a narrative of the past. It's also the narrative about the better future, our vision of the product, and the next goal we have on this route, essentially. And it should always be like, what does success look like? What is the outcome we want to achieve, and what are the measures we are going by while we are getting there? Which stakeholders do we need to engage with? And maybe how often do we need to engage with them And what do we present to them? Is it an email or is it a personal report we give to them? And the risks we haven't managed yet, kind of make them transparent here as well. And this I didn't mention that on the protocol canvas, but also who are the dedicated people working on that? Now I see far too often that too many people are working on too many things in parallel and then nothing really happens. So they're just busy, but there's no outcome coming out of that. So roadmaps are like rivers. Looking back, the past is clear. There is the sentence, it's coherent in retrospective. Looking back, we can explain it, but looking forward, we couldn't really make sure understand it, what's really happening. So the present we can control. So what are we doing today? What are we doing next week, maybe next month? And the future in that regard, we can influence. So the roadmap done well creates alignment and clarity. It's a really strong communication tool to the people we work for. Think along the lines of stakeholders again. And also the roadmap which we have currently in place helps us as a direction of travel. This is where we are going right now. So rivers are fluid and they do adapt to changes. And if you look into kind of like rivers, how they were like a couple of 100 years ago, the direction was different. So they adjust as needed. So to quickly summarize here everything, don't ignore the past. Envision a better future and the reason why you are doing what you're doing. Shape your present, helping you to get to your destination, the what and the how today. Focus on outcomes for your users and use the result feedback. So if possible, build those capabilities into your product so that you have real-time information as much as possible so that you can always see like what's going on and where should we be and where we are really. Use measures as boundaries so that you stay within them because you know these boundaries are safe, but also maybe warning signals. If this goes higher than that, something is off. We need to find out what's going on so that we can adjust and correct direction accordingly. And for this also we often have to go ahead and insert decision points so that you can really go ahead and inspect and adapt as you go. Just as a last sentence. So use the narrative, not a Gantt chart, which we have seen, I think, one before. Okay, so that was it. Roadmaps, that's my perspective on it.